Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the State Representative District 99 Republican Forum conducted by the Greater Burlington Partnership's Government Relations Committee. I am Eva Castillo, a member of the committee, and I will be your moderator this afternoon, and Rachel Lindeen is our timekeeper. There are two candidates with us this afternoon, Dennis Cohoon and Matthew Rinker, representing our community in Des Moines. This forum will consist of rounds of questions asked by the moderator to which candidates will have varying times to respond. The order of response will be rotated so that each candidate has the opportunity to be the first to answer a question. Candidates have not seen the questions in advance. I do ask the candidates to observe the signals from our timekeeper and to stop your response when time has expired in fairness to other candidates. Each candidate will have the opportunity to give 2-minute opening statements highlighting their reason for running for office. At the conclusion of the forum, each candidate will also have 2 minutes of closing statements. We will begin with the opening statements. Since Dennis Cohoon is first in the alphabet, we'll go with him. Dennis?
Well, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank the Greater Burlington Partnership for putting on this forum. I want to start by saying that the reason I'm running, I see issues that we are not addressing at an adequate level, and one of those being education. I was a public school teacher for over 30 years, and we continually are underfunding our education system and our public education system in Iowa. Another area is the mental health area. We are funding it. You may have heard the governor say last night that we're putting $28 million into this, but I just feel that we are losing the battle on mental health. We need to find ways to have facilities for people that are suffering from mental health issues. We need to make sure there is adequate staff. We need to make sure there are counselors and people that are trained to work with people that are suffering from mental illness. We see the number of homeless people growing in around the state, even in our own community, and also teen suicide is reaching levels that are really frightening here. And so another area that I want to be working on, aside from state infrastructure, which I've been on that committee for years, we need to continue to work on the infrastructure we have for our roads and bridges in southeast Iowa, as well as our bricks and mortar. There are other buildings that we need to make sure that we have. The tax issue is another issue I want to work on. We're going to look at eliminating the income tax. And I think taxes should be reduced, but we need to make sure that if we eliminate that tax, where are we going to make up the revenue for that loss? Because that's over half our budget. So are we going to cut programs or increase some other taxes? Other issues that are going to be coming up, obviously the abortion issue will be a major issue, as well as trying to work improving workers' rights in the state of Iowa. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Matt?
Yeah, first, thank you very much for everyone that's here. I know there's a lot that goes into putting this on, whether it's coming up with the questions, taking time off of work to be here in the room, or moderate the event. Also, thank you to Dennis for taking part in this. My name is Matthew Rinker. I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a small business owner, I'm a veteran. I've been a Burlington City Councilman for 5 years, and I've been a community leader and public servant for even longer than that. My drive for running for the Iowa House really stems from some of the changes that have taken place over the last 12 months at the state level. Recently, there was a round of redistricting that took place, which it normally does about every 10 years. And as a result of that redistricting, we lost one of our locally elected state officials from a local perspective. We still have representation, but the pie got a lot smaller for this area. As a result of that, there's going to be much more of an emphasis in having a powerful and effective voice in the Iowa House district that represents this part of the state. That was my primary motivation for running. I've always been involved in policy, and it's going to be extremely important moving forward that we have someone that sits at the majority table, is willing to at times be the loudest person in the room, and is going to ensure that the interests of District 99 here in Southeast Iowa are heard, and is going to work to create a better environment, not only for things like education and mental health, but also for our local economy and housing and workforce. So that's why I'm running.
All right. Thank you. So each question will have 90 seconds to answer. So we will start with you, Matt.
Sure.
Growing the next generation of workforce is a key component to success for Greater Burlington. How will you support the expansion and continued updates of the career and technical education?
Yeah, so workforce is probably the biggest issue that we face here in the state. Locally, we have 2,000 jobs available that are available out there for local District 99 people that are looking for jobs. We need to do a number of things. First, we need to make sure that we have adequate housing. Well, that's ranked as one of the biggest things that people that are in the labor market, when they decide to relocate someplace, that they're looking for. They're looking for quality housing. They're looking for affordable housing. Those are things that in this corridor of the state, we haven't done a very good job of improving. At the local level, especially on the Burlington City Council, I've been extremely aggressive in creating policy and supporting those initiatives. And even here into the future, with abatements and programs, and I think that will go a long way to improving the housing situation in this area. Retraining, especially for displaced workers. So currently we find that people that lose their jobs, they kind of go into a cycle where they will take the next available job that's available to them, but that job doesn't necessarily always put them in a better situation. So we need to redevelop the retraining program that we have for displaced workers. We also need to support workers with things like childcare. And make sure that we are investing into the programs that the governor has proposed to make sure that parents that want to go out into the workforce have the ability to do that.
Dennis?
Thank you. Well, as far as the workforce, this has been something that community colleges have had a major role in our part of the state in terms of the training, and we need to continue to obviously do that. And some of the things that were mentioned, we do need to be addressing, whether that be housing or daycare. We do have a shortage in both of those areas of availability. But we also have a shortage of workers. A lot of times the jobs are there, but we don't have the workers to fill those jobs. So we need to find ways to not only train and retrain the people that we have in the area, but also to encourage and have ways of increasing the number of people here so that we can fill those jobs. But aside from that, we also need to make sure that the wages are decent and benefits so that people can afford to live on those jobs and not have to pick up another part-time job in addition to what they're doing to make ends meet. And so we need to make sure those jobs are decent paying jobs that provide definite and decent benefits for people that have a living wage. Thank you.
All right, Dennis, we're going to start with you with this next one. Tourism is an economic driver for Greater Burlington and the state of Iowa, averaging $5 million annually for the state. How do you grow and sustain the tourism industry for Greater Burlington and statewide?
One of the ways to work on increasing tourism is to make sure that we expand the number of dollars that are put into tourism. Years ago, we used to there was a majority of the legislature that did not favor spending money on tourism, figuring it was a waste of state dollars. Once we convinced enough people to support that, we saw that the number of dollars coming in for every dollar we invested, at the time it was about for every dollar we put in, we would gain back $3 in investment. And so that kept growing and growing. We need to continue to do that. It's been a long trail for Iowa, I think, to really pride themselves in what we have in our state, whether it be small communities or large ones. And finally, we've gotten to the point where tourism has become a major economic development tool in the state, and a lot of communities are able to sell what they have, and it's a variety of things. We may not have oceans and mountains, but we do have a lot of things to offer people in Iowa. And so tourism, I think, will continue to grow, and it still needs to be a priority of the state to invest in tourism. Thank you.
Thanks. Matt?
Could you repeat the question?
Sure.
Just want to make sure.
Tourism is an economic driver for Greater Burlington and the state of Iowa, averaging $5 billion annually for the state. How do you grow and sustain the tourism industry for Greater Burlington and statewide?
Yeah, so I think you grow by obviously investing in the infrastructure that supports tourism. In the 5 years that I've been on the council, I've voted to invest more than $25 million into infrastructure that directly supports tourism. If you turn around in the audience today and look out the window onto the riverfront, you'll see a large portion of that. I've been very supportive of projects like the turf, the bubble. The courts project that's taking place. I've been a part of initiatives to create economic development and incentives through that program to support that project. At the city council level, and I'm sure even at the state level, we always talk about heads in beds. We have representatives in the crowd today that work with the local tourism offices and have been vital in creating tourism locally. And when we talk about heads in beds, we talk about emphasizing the importance of the things and the jewels that we have in our community, things like the Anne Frank Museum in Danville, the Snake Alley. That's probably the biggest attraction here locally, but then also our riverfront. Over the last 12 months, we've put a lot of motions in place. And when I say we, I talk about the public and private partnerships that exist to support things like the cruises that are now coming into the Burlington area. Those dollars, whether it's spent in a hotel, a restaurant, or a retail shop, are what pay for dance lessons and medical bills, support small businesses, and support the infrastructure of local government.
All right, thank you. You're up next. So, continued economic growth is key for Greater Burlington's success. What can the state do to keep the business and worker attractions competitive?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, a lot of that has to do with taxes. Dennis already talked a little bit about some of the changes that the state has made at the tax rate. The commercial tax rate will be capped at about 5.5%. The flat tax that the governor's proposed and got passed last year will drop that to about 3.9%. The 3.9% change is going to save Iowa taxpayers about $1.6 billion over the next 5 years. And the commercial tax rate will save over $50 million over the next 4 years. That revenue is going to find its way back into the local municipalities and businesses and communities that we live in. And that revenue is, again, what supports the communities that we live in. We need to continue to drive that, make sure that in government, we are providing an optimum environment for growth. I always say this, government doesn't create jobs. Businesses do, and predominantly small businesses create jobs. We need to make sure that we are removing as many of the barriers as possible to be able to support small businesses and large businesses so that they can pay their workers a competitive wage, provide competitive benefits, and so that they can make sure that they can grow in the communities that they currently exist in.
Thanks. Dennis?
Well, I think one of the ways that we can continue to make our attractions competitive in Iowa in terms of a workforce, people that are going to move here want an excellent education system. And years ago, Iowa was considered always one of the top 1, 2, or 3 education states in the nation, along with Wisconsin and Minnesota. We are no longer at that level. We're in the middle of the pack. And so a strong education system would be a reason that people would be here, want to move here, want to work here, want to live here. Our healthcare system, not just mental health, but healthcare system is something that we need to continue to address and make sure that it's affordable, accessible, and that pharmaceuticals are at a rate that a level that people can afford, so that they have a good healthcare system. Safe communities is another area that we need to make sure that if someone's going to move here, they want to make sure that it's a place that they'd want to raise a family. And last but not least, as I mentioned earlier, the wages are obviously a big part of that. Wages, benefits, so people can make a living at the job they have and want to stay where they are. So thank you.
All right, next question. Where do you stand on funding the Conservation Trust, especially considering the growth in demand for outdoor recreation amenities in recent years?
Thank you. I support the Conservation Trust. Years ago, when we passed the legislation that said the next time the sales tax was raised, that a percentage of that would go to help environmental and all of our things here in terms of conservation. It would help clean water. It would help expand our trails, our bike trails, camping, any of the outdoor things that people in Iowa enjoy. That's been there and has been around for the last 12 years, and it's never been passed to increase that an additional amount so that that money would be there. Now, we do put money through, some of it through REAP, but again, that's never been fully funded. When it first passed, it passed unanimously, 100-0, in 1989. And $20 million is what's supposed to be invested in our environment, and we have reached that once. We have never reached the original bill, which was $30 million. Typically, it's 15, but sometimes it's been under 10. So we need to do more in terms of investing in our environment, and I do support the trust to be supported. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt?
Yeah, so I as well also support the trust. The $12.5 million that we currently fund it at isn't what the legislature has committed to in the past. It was $20 million, but just like at home, your budget dictates what you're able to invest in things. So you can't spend more than you take in revenue. It is an extremely vital program. One of the biggest pieces in that program is the 20% of that money that goes towards soil conservation. And in Iowa, that's a big deal. And the reason that's a big deal is because we're the #2 exporter of crops in this country. And you can't grow crops if you don't conserve the soil that they grow in. So we need to continue to invest in that, continue to work to increasing our investment in that. The other thing that I like about the REAP program is it also promotes things like education, outdoor space, state land management, and parks. And if you look in Southeast Iowa, we've got great parks. Parks are a huge quality of life thing. People are drawn to areas that have good recreational opportunities, whether it's going for a hike on a trail, riding a bike on a bike trail, hunting, fishing. Those are all things that improve the quality of life of people who live, especially in District 99. And I would be in favor of continuing to work to try and increase the funding for that program. But we have to do it in a way where we are balancing our checkbook.
All right. Thank you. All right. Many households have two wage earners working outside of the home or are single parents. Good child care is a concern for them. What steps can the state take to address affordable daycare?
Yeah, so the governor's got some great initiatives that she's been working on, and again, I'd be a major supporter of. One of the things that she's promoting today is a $480 million investment into childcare. That investment creates about 9,000 new childcare workers across the state. It creates recruitment bonuses. It also invests in early childhood community centers, which here in Southeast Iowa have been a major benefit in the past. As I said in a previous question, if we don't support single-parent households with child care resources, even two-parent households with child care resources, those parents can't go out and work in the workforce. They can't help us solve our workforce problems. They can't make money to support their families. They can't invest in themselves. Maybe it's not going to work. Maybe it's going to school. As a parent, I know that my wife, who's in the crowd today, we are consistently talking about what the daycare schedule looks like for the next week. I know that there are a lot of parents that don't have those kinds of resources, but I promise you that we wouldn't be able to do the things we do if we didn't have those resources. And I think that the state needs to follow suit, and legislators need to support the governor's $480 million initiative so that we can invest in those programs so that those people can go out and do the things that make their lives productive.
Thank you. Well, daycare has been an issue that's been discussed a lot in the last several years in the legislature. There hasn't been enough done, obviously. Like in so many areas, we are short of staff for those areas. We are short of funding. We are short of facilities. And so we do need to make a commitment to daycare and to child care resources for parents to be able to work, whether that's a full-time job or if they have to be working part-time jobs, to be able to be at work so that they know there are children well taken care of. One of the areas that a lot of places have started to do, in fact, even here in Burlington, is to provide child care right there on the work site, so that the parent knows full well that their child is well taken care of, and they're not that far away if they need to be, whether it's a health problem or whether they just want to make sure that their child is being taken care of. And so it really is helpful to have that. With the governor's plan, it all depends on, you often hear the details, the devil's in the details, and that's what we need to see. Because at a time when we're eliminating one of our biggest revenues areas, and that's the income tax, there's only going to be so much money to go around. And if you're going to still try to balance a budget, we got to find out what your priorities are, because that'll determine what your budget will be. And so it's not for sure that that is definitely a priority of the majority party at this time.
All right. So adequate housing for continued population growth is an issue for Greater Burlington. In your opinion, what can the state do or continue to do to help with housing?
Well, one of the things that we've done is in the Housing Trust Fund, annually it's usually been like $3 million, but we've put a little bit more in it sometimes. But even then, that's not adequate enough. Those funds, the request outnumber the amount that's there. So obviously it's not funded enough. And I think we need to reach out and look at providing local communities with more either whether it be grant money or other availability of funds to make sure that they're able to get programs off the ground. There are several communities that are starting to do that, but it's very difficult without the matching funds to go with it. So.
Yeah, so housing's been something that I've been very passionate about over my time as a Burlington City Councilman. So I talked a little bit about incentives. One of the things that I've been aggressive on working on, and we should have that finished up here later this year, are programs to give people an opportunity to invest in their homes here locally in Burlington and save a few dollars on their property tax as an incentive to do that. We need to support workforce housing tax credits. We need to support the historic tax credits. Downtown Burlington is a perfect example of where the historic tax credit program has had major successes. In the last 10 years, we've seen over $125 million of investment in this area, and we've created almost 450 new residential units just in the downtown Burlington area alone. Growing your tax base means also growing property, number of housing units. I talked about workforce. People who are looking for a place to go to work are also looking for quality housing units and affordable housing units. Well, you don't have that unless you build new units. And in the environment that we live in today with record inflation, this area is depleted in the number of trade, labor, skilled workers. All of those things, when you muddle them together, turn out to what they do is they drive up the cost of building new homes. So we need to incentivize those. We also need to encourage people to invest in their current property with the TIF program that we have in place today.
So quality infrastructure is key for Greater Burlington businesses. What can the state do to ensure that Highway 61 stays in the 5-year plan to have quality bridges and navigable waterways?
Navigable waterways?
Yeah.
There we go. Okay. I think I understood everything. Okay. So, Highway 61, huge initiative. We've seen a lot of work done on that. We need to continue to see that work done on that. The United States across the entire country is extremely unique. You travel anywhere else in the world and no other country has the highway system that we do. And I would argue that highway system has been one of the most vital things in helping us create the economy that we have. Iowa is included in that. We have a number of great roadways in the state of Iowa, but we need to improve upon that at an even higher rate. You can't get goods and services from a production center to the market if you don't have roads to get them there. I talked about Iowa agriculture being the number 2 exporter of agriculture in the country. We got to be able to move that corn and those soybeans. We need to make sure that we are working with the Iowa Corps engineers to make sure the river is navigable because most of that agriculture moves up and down the riverways via the river. And highways, I would say, fall kind of into that same category. I would also argue that we need to even do a better job of working with the other states around us in order to improve the four-lane systems that link up to Iowa. Highway 34 is a perfect example of that. We need to work with the state of Illinois, and we need to encourage them and create a partnership to get that done.
All right, Dennis. You don't want me to repeat that word.
Well, we're located in a unique area, being along the river, and all of our modes of transportation are important, be it the river, airports, rail, and our highways. Highway 61 I feel like it'll be on that 5-year plan. The main thing is to make sure it stays and keeps moving up and not move down. But in terms of what can we do to encourage that, Obviously, as a legislator, you can talk to the department. It's not something that we can pass anymore in a committee of saying we want this particular road project done over another. And so you have to, but you can talk to them individually and encourage it, as well as when we have our Southeast Iowa Days or Great River Days and people are up for the community, talk to someone from the DOT and encourage them to make sure that the highway continues to be funded. But in the big picture, the other thing that we need to be looking at is that, you know, with fewer automobiles using fuel, the amount of money that's coming in for roads is going to lessen, because we're not only building new roads but maintaining the ones we have. And so we need to take a long-term approach about the future of transportation in the state of Iowa, and whatever you want to look at, whether that's electric cars or whether that's fuel-efficient vehicles or changing how highways are built or eliminating some highways. By that, I don't mean mandating or turning them back over to local government, but really deciding whether or not we need to keep them or not.
All right. So mental health is a top priority for our Chamber of Commerce members. What can the state do to improve access to a full spectrum mental health support for all in Southeast Iowa?
Now, this is something that we've kind of talked about already, and I can only say that, you know, we need to make sure, you know, originally we had 99 counties doing the programs. Then it became regional, and now the governor's looking at it being state. Typically, that's not the best, because the state tries to do a one-size-fits-all, but it is doable if we really truly know and bring people in that are in the trenches in mental health and know what the needs are, and know, like, you know, where we need facilities, how many facilities, where we need staff at and how much, so it's adequately staffed. So we have counselors that are actually educated and working with people with mental health problems. And so there's so many things we can do, but I think we really need some people that are professionals that know what the problems are and know how to deal with it. And then the state needs to take that advice and listen to it and come up with a program on where that funding is going to go and how it's going to be appropriated, not just appropriate some dollars and hope that it'll be carried out. So it's something that is definitely a problem. It's increasing. It's not going to go away. It's going to continue, I think, to be a major problem this next year for the legislature to address. And I hope we address it adequately, not only with funds, but adequately and truly finding out what do we need to do and how do we, if not solve the problem, at least reduce it and help some people that really need help.
All right.
Yeah, so mental health is something that's extremely important to me. I actually had the opportunity to sit in a meeting a couple of days ago with the crisis intervention training team here locally. And I challenge anyone out there that's listening, go sit in that meeting. It's open to the public, and you'll really get a great picture of what mental health care looks like in this corridor of the state. So the mental health crisis, or the problem with funding in mental health, really started about 20 years ago when the federal government said, okay, states, you're going to take care of this. And then states a couple of years later came along and said, okay, counties, you're going to take care of this. And what they've done in the elimination of the facilities and the support that they had for mental health programs is they've pushed those costs down to the local level. Well, first off, most local communities aren't in a position to be able to fund that type of program. And when you don't fund those types of programs, the problems don't go away. People with mental health related issues don't get the help that they need. And that pressure is really put on local law enforcement and the cities and municipalities and communities they live in to figure it out. That's basically how it's worked over the last 20 years. My argument would be is that we need to go back, we need to look at effective infrastructure, what those programs need to look like. I also would say we need to put an emphasis on supporting mental health related needs of students in schools. We've got a lot of kids that don't know how to handle the mental health related issues that they have. The Department of Education recommends that there should be one school counselor for every 215 kids. In the state of Iowa, we have 435 kids for each counselor.
Thank you. So quality education is vital for our communities and workforce pipeline. Current leadership has proposed changes to choice options in the state. Do you support vouchers for education?
So I'm absolutely open to the idea of having a conversation around school choice programs. I will tell you that personally, if we decide to move in that direction, there's several things that I want to see be a part of that. First any school or any institution, education institution that gets public dollars needs to be accredited. Second, any private institution that takes public dollars needs to provide the same programming and support programs to all of their students that public schools are expected to require. And then the other thing that I'd like to see made a part of that is locally raised dollars would remain locally. We don't need those dollars going outside of the community. I don't want the city of Burlington or Danville or all the other communities in between West Burlington supporting communities or education infrastructure in Des Moines or Clinton. The other part of that would be making sure that those requirements are also, there are requirements also in the funding side of that. Education is probably the biggest conversation every single year. And every single year, we kind of kick the can down the road on funding it. Locally, our schools don't necessarily have an education funding problem as much as they do a population problem. The overall decline in the number of students, that's where the problem is with the amount of money that schools receive. Right now, they get about $7,400 per kid. If they continue to see that decline continue, then they're going to continue to see financial problems.
Dennis?
Well, I do not support having a voucher program to take taxpayer money and use it instead of on public schools. It's taking money away from public schools, and we're already underfunding. What you'll hear every year from the majority party is that they increase funding for education. Well, the total amount that's going in is increasing, but it's not maintaining what is needed for schools to exist. Schools will tell you they need about a 3% statewide in aid, and we're putting in 2.25% this year. Sometimes it's 1%. Sometimes it's been 0. And it's like trying to do a repair in your house. If you're only going to do it part way, that's not going to solve the problem. It's going to continue to get worse. And so if you fund it at 0, you're eliminating programs. And right now we have a shortage of teachers around the state, have a shortage of school counselors, bus drivers, you name it, because we have, and paramutual or paras, just the teacher assistants is what I want to say, in the classroom. We're short on those. And so when you continue to shortchange education, you're asking for a problem. And like I said earlier, education used to be number 1 in Iowa. When I would go to a conference as state legislators and say you were from Iowa, you got people's attention. They want to know, what were you doing with education in Iowa? That isn't that way anymore. And instead, we want to worry about putting cameras in the classroom, banning books, making teachers saying they're sinister or evil, or treat them as felons. That's not right.
Okay, final question. What would your top legislative priority be should you get elected to represent us in the legislature? Dennis?
Well, my top priority would be education. As I said, being a public school teacher, I want to see that our programs are adequately funded. Too many times we say that we're increasing some funding in education, and what's happening is they're playing a shell game. Take money away from one program in education, add it over here and say, we've increased this by $10 million. What they don't tell you is that we've decreased this other one by $10 million. And so that's not the way to actually fund education. Years ago, when we would have meetings about how much the state needed to be funded as far as education for state aid, we had a person that was an expert in this come around from the country, from Colorado, saying, if Iowa fully funded its schools, it would be at 22%. And here we are, the last 12, 15 years, arguing 1, 2, maybe 0, when we're never going to get to 22. But the idea is that we're totally unfunding our education system. And, when we really need to do things for education, not to education. We seem to always be putting up more barriers. It's hard for me to believe why, hopefully, but it's hard for me to believe why young people would really want to get into the education field with the way state government is feeling about them, thinking they're sinister. They need to have someone look over their shoulder, find out what their lesson plans are for the whole year, and put up more hoops for them to jump through. That's not going to increase or make us a quality education state if we do that.
Do you want to ask? Can you ask it one more time?
Yep.
Sometimes it's hard for me to hear it if you're asking it that way.
Fine. What would your top legislative priority be should you get elected to represent in the legislature?
Yeah, so, I'm a big believer in the fact that as policymakers, we can't have one issue that's important to us, because if you only have one issue that's important to you, then you're not going to focus on all the other stuff that you need to also be willing to pay attention to. Education is extremely important. Largest part of the budget. We do need to support teachers. We also need to make sure that parents are comfortable with the education that their children are receiving. I believe that in the conversation that I'm willing to have, there's an equilibrium between properly supporting public schools, but then also providing an opportunity for parents to get the education for the kids that they want. Crime is a very important thing to me. I've been touting indeterminate sentences for years. I'm a big believer in the fact that we need to look at that. We need to make sure that felons that are arrested with firearms are not released back onto the street within 12 to 15 months of being arrested, just to continue to be a problem for law enforcement. I think mental health is something that we can't overlook. Mental health is something we need to take a serious look at, create infrastructure, support the nonprofits and private partners in the communities that exist to take care of mental health related issues, and infrastructure. At the state level, infrastructure has got to be in the top 3 issues that we look at, supporting roads, bridges. Iowa ranks very poorly when you take a look at our bridge infrastructure. In fact, one of the worst in the country. Those are things that if we don't start to pay attention to today, we're going to end up with the bill later on, and we're going to be scratching our heads to try and figure out how to pay for it. So those are all things that are important to me.
All right, so closing statements. Each candidate now has the opportunity to make a 2-minute closing statement. So we'll start with you, Matt.
Yeah, so again, thank you very much for putting this on. Again, I know there's a lot that goes into this. As a local community leader, as a husband, as a father, as a small business owner, as someone who actually lives in this district, I think it's extremely important that we continue to invest in it. I think it's important that we have somebody that can be a voice at the state level and sits at the majority party table, so that when there are issues that come up, that those issues can be heard and hopefully be addressed. I think it's also important that we have someone that's effective. With all due respect to my opponent, the party that has the majority today is the Republican Party, and as a result of that, it's going to be near impossible for my opponent to be able to make a big difference at the state level. I just look at the last 10 years, and Dennis, you've been in office 13,074 days today. Congratulations, by the way. But in the last 10 years, he's authored absolutely 0 bills. So those are all things that come back to representation. We need quality representation in Des Moines, and we need to make sure that it's effective representation. So I'd ask for everyone's support on November 8th. And again, thank you very much for letting me be a part of this.
All right. Dennis?
Thank you. Well, my number one issue is education, but obviously there are many, many other issues. And as a legislator, you have to deal with multiple issues. But if you have one, a lot of people are there for one reason, and a lot of them run on one issue. But aside from education, obviously it's mental health, it's infrastructure, it's cutting unemployment benefits to workers that need to be restored, it's the tax cuts of eliminating in taxes, and it's the abortion issue that's going to be important. But specifically, on the tax issue, we're cutting income taxes to eliminate it completely. And what will happen is this. That's over half of our income. We talk about making sure our budget is balanced. Over half of our income comes from income tax revenue. If we don't have that, we're either going to have to increase other taxes or cut programs or both. And when it comes to not being able to be effective and get anything done, my opponent not being there doesn't understand that when you're in the minority, you can work to get some things done with the majority party. One of the things that has helped by me being there as long as I have is getting things funded that a lot of Democrats wouldn't, only because they've known people. You have working relationships. And the people that have come in now, they don't have that. Why? Because a lot of times the political parties get involved in the campaign and they become negative. And when people get up there, Democrats don't want to work with Republicans. Republicans don't want to work with Democrats. I entered at a time when you actually got to know each other. You worked together. You worked on compromises. Today, the Republican Party doesn't even compromise. House and Senate committees don't even meet together. So it's not like being in the majority is, I can get everything done. That is not true. And on infrastructure, again, you can criticize where we're at in terms of the roads and bridges. Those things are not decided by the legislature. the budget is approved, but it's decided by the department, not by an individual. So it really doesn't matter if you're the majority or minority on that.
Right. Well, I just want to say thank you to Dennis and Matt for being here today. For the audience members that are here in the room, thank you. For everyone online, remember to vote for your candidate of choice on November 8th. Thank you.